Hello, thank you everyone. I would like to start by acknowledging the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the land that we're meeting on today, and pay my respects to elders past and present. My name is Sarah Close. I'm an economist and principal at E3 Advisory, an infrastructure and planning advisory firm. I'm going to be chairing the discussion today, and we've got a fantastic panel with diverse perspectives in alphabetical order, so it's all very equal. Aaron Kosovich, founder of Reschematic, the AI tool that you've been seeing today. Aaron's a former economist from Urbis and GHD and holds an honours in economics. Adrian Kemp, founding partner of Houston Kemp, an expert in the application of economics to infrastructure regulation, public policy and energy markets. And as we've been hearing, is already applying Claude in his organisation and even driving home with Claude. So we'll hear more about that today. Cassandra Wilkinson, Executive Director at New South Wales Treasury, who leads the Centre for Economic Evidence and is Chair of Treasury's IT and Cyber Committee, where she's looking into aspects such as the New South Wales Government's ethical AI framework and AI assurance process and obligations. And Dr. Li Ming Zhu, a research director at CSIRO's Data 61, where he's leading the software and computational systems research program that's innovating in trustworthy, responsible and safe AI systems. And Li Ming has written a number of books and delivered keynote speeches relating to responsible AI. Cost-benefit analysis has long been a cornerstone of decision-making in policy, but we're now at a point where artificial intelligence could reshape how we generate, test and communicate evidence. With that comes opportunity, but also real questions about credibility, transparency and risk. Today, this panel is going to be asking, where can AI genuinely improve CBAs? What risks do we need to manage? And what does the future of AI look like in CBA for Australia? Before we do get started, I wanted to step back a little bit. It's obviously kind of hidden there. Reflect on where Australia and the globe is right now in the context of artificial general intelligence. On screen, which you can maybe see it more over in the corner, OpenAI has classified 5 levels of AGI. Many of us now are likely at level 1 using chatbots like ChatGPT, and as Adrian's even just been talking us through, and then Aaron's tools moving arguably into reasoning into level 2. No one really knows exactly if and when we may achieve level 5, when AI can perform the work of entire organisations and so-called super intelligence has been achieved. The CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amde, who developed Claude, expects very powerful early AGI capabilities within 2 to 3 years. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman believes his company already knows how to build AGI and may reach super intelligence within thousands of days. But some thinks it's longer term. Meta researcher Jan Nisun argues that human-level AI will take several years, if not a decade. Even without considering that, actually really can't see that at all, if and when superintelligence may be achieved, this is a slide prepared by the Australian Federal Government, reminds us that the pace of change in AI has been substantial and we're in the middle of a period of rapid change that will drive GDP growth and alter the way humans live. With that in mind, let's dive in to explore where AI can add value to CBAs and the risk and the practical realities. Just go back in case you want to look at our little faces. Right, okay, opportunities and possibilities. I wanted to start just by hearing from each of the panellists. When you think about the intersection of cost-benefit analysis and AI, what excites you most and what worries you most? Starting with Cassandra.
As of 15 seconds ago, As of about 15 seconds ago, what excites me most is the prospect of Sam Altman being made redundant by his own product within 1,000 days. That's delicious. What excites me most is seeing the drudgery taken out of economics, because it is regarded as a boring job, which it is not, but there are boring bits. It'd be lovely to see less of the boring bits and more of the fun bits, which gets me to the risks, which are largely associated with the really interesting, exciting bits. And to me, economics is not really maths. There's a lot of maths in it, and the tools will be great eventually. I was told by Microsoft people this morning that maths is the thing it's worst at, which is, anywho. In my 30 years in public service, there is no better tool for effective, accountable, ethical choice making than the economic toolkit. The cost-benefit analysis toolkit, business case toolkits help people who are the kind of regular people who should be able to govern a state in a democracy, understand their options and make choices and be accountable for those choices to the people who put them there. Economics is applied ethics, it's applied philosophy, and that part of the job should be more engaged with by humans. I suppose the biggest risk, I think, at the moment is that Microsoft encourage us to stop thinking of it as an assistant and think of it as a colleague, probably in response to the fact that most of Australia's leading trust-oriented businesses require it to be treated as an assistant with full human supervision. Because not only is it a new colleague who's learning, it's a colleague who's pretty racist, it's a colleague who lies, it's a colleague who thinks that analysts at Treasury look like Asian women and managers at Treasury look like white men. So it's a colleague who's untrustworthy, poorly trained, and kind of slightly fascist adjacent in its values. So this colleague needs a lot of training before I would let it do very much.
Okay, where does one go from there? Look, I'm going to actually talk about risks as well in a moment, but like I think everyone focuses on the benefits, right? And that's exactly what I was doing earlier. And I think one of the key benefits is that it's a communications tool. So everyone in their pocket right now, non-economists, can go out there and pretend to do a CBA or an MCA or a, some sort of way of structured thinking through decision making, and they could fool themselves that they're doing a great job. But at the same time, the opportunity, I think, is that it helps those people understand why or how these tools, through that access to that information, can help them make better decisions. And I think that's a really, really positive thing, that accessibility of information. It's just the next step in that. But I take Cassandra's points. The risks are also quite considerable, but it is a tool. And just like how I have absolute zero tolerance for any of my colleagues being racist, fascist, or anything, I have absolute intolerance for my AI tools doing that as well. So I think the question there is actually, there's always going to be, and I think will always should be, an important role for humans in that, as you take responsibility for the application of these tools and how you use those tools in order to do your job ethically and appropriately. But we probably don't focus enough on the language of that, nor indeed the governance tools. And I'll tell one story, sorry. The reason why we implemented Claude across our firm last year, and as I say, when Claude joined the firm, is because I knew that everyone was using it anyway. An uncontrolled use of AI tools is a massive and enormous risk. I see this entirely across all the public service sectors right now. People are using it. And so I wanted to make sure that we put guardrails around it. And I knew we had to do that quickly, because in the absence of those guardrails, you actually have more problems. So I'll just leave you with that. That's actually one of our key motivations.
Can everybody hear me? Yep. So from my view, one of the most exciting things is, just to use an analogy, most people are probably familiar with the command terminal, that black window that you see on a computer. They use it in a lot of movies featuring hackers. You can think of that as being direct access to the operating system, right? That's what it's for. And when you use a ChatGPT or a Claude, what you're effectively doing is directly accessing the operating system. And so what I'm really excited about is the potential to add in an application layer where we are actually building products, building things on top of that operating system that can be used in useful ways. And mine is one example, but I'm sure there will be more examples. What that enables is not just using AI faster, but using it in a more controlled way that is able to have more guardrails, have more safety, have more security, and enable a paradigm shift in the way that we do a CBA. So not just a solo exercise on an Excel sheet, but something that's collaborative. And I suppose my biggest concern is a characterization around this idea that we're going to get to a point where we'll be able to press a button and the whole CBA will be made for us, therefore making half our workforce redundant, and all of the expertise that we've banked up is therefore useless. What are we going to do? I just don't think it's going to get to that. I think there will come this application layer that enables us to really, really get to the heart of the insight that we're trying to provide and offer more of that in a better, smarter way.
Right. So what excites me, I think it's the general directionality of where AI develops. According to the slide we show, we get capabilities growing and growing. Actually, there's this trite quote, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Coming from a science organization, I can say they are already innovators in some space. Every other week, you have a front page, Nature or Science, to say AI has discovered something. It's not only discovered, like AlphaEvolve, Google developed AlphaEvolve discovered some matrix multiplication, 53 years that no human have been able to discover. AI discovered a new way of doing more efficient matrix multiplication. And the algorithms are deployed in Google cloud data center, save 0.7% of their compute energy usage. That's huge from a Google point of view, 0.7% of their energy and emission based on a new algorithm discovered by AI alone. That's already happening. It's just in a very narrow domain. So I think the directionality is definitely there. It's not going to work for everything, but it's there. What worries me, I think it's probably two things. One is because AI is so accessible and you can use AI to code up a nice demo all the time. So rigorous evaluation is really important. That applies to both sides of the camp. People are very suspicious of AI. They may say, last night I used this tool, it doesn't work. So my sample size of one shows it's not that yet. Another one might be showing a great demonstration, but when it's deployed to real world, maybe there is a problem. So every AI tool developed, as Adrian and Aaron said, we evaluate that tool very rigorously. The evidence shows it may works very well. That rigorous evaluation is really important rather than generalize the claim whether AI can do certain things or not. Simply because it's so accessible, everybody can use it. The other one is, when we put a human in the loop, we don't want the human to be the, I use the word liability sponge. Basically, you are responsible. Here's the AI tool. But how can a human meaningfully look at all the results generated in a few seconds? How do we evaluate that? The things behind this tool, the data, the rationale, the calculation, that's the thing that a human look at. And from a cost-benefits analysis point of view, in some cases, the oversight effort is so big that it's bigger than you're doing it yourself. That's why people get frustrated. This thing made this thing very nicely, but to make it into acceptable quality, it wastes me more time than doing it myself. But in other cases, if you design it very carefully, exploiting this solve and verify asymmetry, sometimes it takes a lot of time to solve a problem, but very little time to verify whether it's correct or not. If you can exploit that, you actually can really save a lot of cost. Even it's not perfect because your oversight effort is really small and obvious. So that's I think the other thing people need to. One last thing I probably will speak that unthinkable is, what if AI can do CBA, completely? If you look at no human being in the world can beat chess, Go with AI. AI dominates humanity, but the number of people playing chess and Go is at a historical high. The number of grandmasters is at a historical high. Human skills in chess and Go are at a historical high. Why? They learn from AI. They learn how AI does certain things. So I'm not saying CBA will reach that, but in certain domain, AI will be able to beat human in every possible way. But you can learn from it. Be curious and learn from it. And people still play chess and Go with each other by kind of without using AI assistant and just play it as a game. But I think in some domain, they may become the future. Thank you.
Oh, I like the link between Chessmaster, CBA. Yeah, yeah, I'm on. Adrian, from an economist perspective, you've mentioned you're already using Claude. What's the most unexpected use case or surprising application that's adding value to Kemp?
Yeah, look, we're obviously getting into AI agents right now. So the distinction between an AI agent and a standard kind of LLM, large language model like Claude or ChatGPT, is really the way to have a structured workflow whereby you can use AI type tools in order to get it to think about a particular problem. And I'll give you a specific example just to make that clear. Right at the moment, I'm actually unusually doing a cost-benefit analysis. Estimating the economic impact of bridge strikes. A bridge strike is when a truck hits a bridge or a tunnel. We might see them down here every now and then. The problem that we've got in this particular cost-benefit analysis or basically economic impact analysis is we need data on bridge strikes. Now, the problem we have is that there's no data on bridge strikes anywhere. No one bothers to actually collect that. So we scratched our heads and went, how are we going to do this? And we realized that, of course, people take photos of bridge strikes, right? And they post them up on social media websites. They write news posts and the like. So we built an AI agent to essentially scrape, and of course you can do that in R as well, scrape on a keyword type based search news websites to try and identify all of these instances. But instead of having a person go crawling all over them, we just pointed some AI tools at it in order to basically, from the photo and the text, identify and give me the lat long, and also from the text, predict whether this was a bridge strike or whether it was something else. Now then, of course, we have to go and check it, right? But when you get thousands of these things in a second, and we've now built it into a monitoring tool, so we can now collect data on bridge strikes, I'm quite certain all the road agencies will be quite interested in getting that data. So look, that's just an example of, look, you could actually probably do that using different tools. We built that in half a day with people that probably don't know how to code that, just using standard off-the-shelf AI agent tools. There you go. So look, I raised that because that's where we're at. We're sort of thinking about how can we use those sorts of tools in order to help us collect data in that instance. But we're really, what I've been trying to engender across my team is really curiosity around, well, look, if you can do something using one of these tools quicker, faster, better than how you might have done it before, let's do it. That can only be better for us and obviously also for all of our clients and the community more broadly.
Amazing, thank you. And Aaron, we've already seen you're working at the frontier of AI applications in CBA. What is your vision for how your tool can be and should be being used, and what could be next?
So there's a broader vision that this same way of extracting structure from raw AI output can be used to build a lot of different types of models. And so right now, we're using it to build CBAs and return on investment models. There's nothing to say that it couldn't be applied in a lot of different areas too. And perhaps there's other forums happening in Sydney with engineers or doctors or other domains or verticals with someone like me developing an application in that area. So there's certainly a lot happening. But I think longer term for Reschematic, it's first going really deep into the cost benefit analysis modeling that we're doing currently, building out that capability to a point where we're already pretty comfortable with it, but even more so, and then looking for other areas to take that same technology and apply it there too.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to some of the realities and the risks. Cassandra, Treasury plays the role of ensuring evidence underpinning government decisions is robust and accurate. What are the key risks or limitations you see in applying AI to CBAs in a government context?
The critical thing about that we work. Okay. Critical thing about the way that Treasury works is that the government of the day is made up of people who don't have to be trained in government processes and policies. It should be possible for an intelligent, well-intentioned person to be a cabinet minister with no prior training. One of the reasons they're able to do that is for a couple of 100 years, we've had very professional, disinterested and effective public service around them, providing information that they can rely on to be truthful and factual and prepared in the best interests of the public. Over time, we've codified those obligations for public servants into the Government Sector Employees Act, the Government Sector Finance Act, the Audit Act, the Auditor General's Act. You know, we have a large amount of oversight and governance on us to make sure that the advice that we give to Cabinet to serve the people of New South Wales is advice that we stand by, every word of it. And the critical issue that I see here is and I think, you know, you've alluded to it a bit earlier, you need to understand the information that you're working with before you can assert whether a summary or an extension or a model built off that information is likely to be correct. We need to be able to manipulate information or extend information, interrogate information in a way that we could go to Parliament and tell the Public Accounts Committee, yes, I understood the advice that I was giving and I believed it was in the public interest because the smartest people I know interrogated it. We understood it properly. We knew how it was built. We knew the assumptions that it relied on, and it was truthful, and it was, to the best of our knowledge, advice we thought was in the public interest. And so my challenge around this is not a lack of excitement about reducing drudgery. It is more that we are living in a time where confidence in government is low, and confidence in government leads to fracturing social cohesion. That's a significant problem. And to me, maintaining trust in government means that I have to adopt this technology in a way that is consistent with all of those integrity accountabilities that have been built up to protect our democracy and ensure that it functions on behalf of the people as well as it possibly can. So being aware of the government's ethical AI policy and thinking about the Public Records Act, which, you know, requires that the records we keep are true and accurate, which means we need to really understand what's in them. I'm curious, I'm eager to reduce drudgery, but the adoption of the technology is running way ahead of the governance. And, you know, you could say that more broadly about the whole policy area of AI. It's running ahead of the IP issues involved in the LLMs learning from material that was produced by artists. It is running ahead of the, you know, I guess our democratic architecture, our scientific ethical guidelines. And I just think that it would be fantastic if at least a few of us moved as slowly as we need to make sure that we are doing things right. And it will be exciting to see other people run ahead. You can fast fail and I will learn from you, and you can move quickly and break things and I will watch and learn. But as a public servant, my job is to kind of maintain a foundation. And, you know, and I hope that we both have a role to play in making sure that we all get this right.
Thanks, Cassandra. And maybe I was hoping Lee Ming could help us thinking about how to tackle that, because you've spoken and written a lot about systems engineering being the linchpin of responsible AI. Does that mean, how, from a systems perspective, how can we help governments and how can we help solve the issue that Cassandra's mentioned about trust, accuracy, hallucinations being minimized, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both the technical solutions. We want to make this model better, but we also rely on experts and the governance, which is more cultural, organizational culture and the governance to do that. Back to my, I mean, in one way, it's inevitable, this new wave of AI, because it, you know, it's not that the developers actually trained this AI to do CBA. They trained the AI to do the predict the next word. And somehow they discovered it can also do CBA pretty well with a little bit. So no one in the world, not even the developers, knows why it can do that. But in a way, it may not be So we can't help much because we only ask it to predict the next word. So the really help comes from the expert. When the expert look at not only the result, but the rationale and the reasoning trees, all the evidence traceability, as if it's a junior intern does a job. It writes down everything, why he has done that, what's the rationale, and the senior expert look at that to say, yeah, that's reasonable, that's plausible from an expert point of view. That's where the thing, the expertise come from, the assurance, the confidence comes from. And in some cases, it would be challenging because we increasingly to look at the human baseline. It's not necessarily the ground truth. When we go to, I think sometimes the adoption, the number one challenge we run into is we got an AI. Everybody says, could you make sure this AI is safer and better performance compared to the existing approach, existing expert, based on fairness, bias, everything. But when we ask for the existing metrics, they don't exist. We don't evaluate human in that way. We trust this black box in some way and do that. And how do we evaluate that? How do we have confidence in that? It's going to be a collaboration between experts and AI. And don't take AI's answer for granted, but ask it to produce all the evidence of producing that answer.
I think all of that, by the way, highlights the importance of personal responsibility. But that's still the case and has always been the case and should always be the case, right? Like at the end of the day, my work is my work. If I've used an AI tool to develop that, great. But at the end of the day, I have to take responsibility for it because ultimately it is my work. One of our policies is that we put the names of all the people that work on our reports. And it's always been a deliberate policy because I don't like the idea of people hiding behind the brand or being able to say later, I didn't work on that. And that's all about making sure that my most junior staff members, all the way to myself, can hand on their heart say, yes, I worked on that and I agree with everything because it is a collective piece of work that we take personal responsibility for. I have no intention, apart from the fact when we're required to, of saying that I used R or I used Garobi, or indeed even if I used an AI tool in terms of helping me to develop that, because I am taking personal responsibility for that because it is ultimately my work. And I think that's actually really, really critically important. It's part of our governance framework. But as I say, it's no different to the fact that I always take responsibility for my work, even if some of my more junior staff members have been involved in that.
Yeah, I just think we need to equip the human in the loop with the right tools, with the right package that they can meaningfully review the result without redoing the work. If it's redoing the work, doesn't make sense. But if you have no means to do that, that's why I earlier said we don't want the human to be the liability sponge because you are responsible. If something goes wrong, you are responsible, but you have no means. The AI just summarized 1,000 documents. It's your responsibility to say there's no inaccuracy in the summarization. How can you do that? Sometimes you need to have some special tools for human.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, what are some of the tools that we can use? Is it because sensitivity testing, as you can do with an R model, what are the tools that we should be doing as economists to check the work that, Aaron, maybe you're already looking at?
Yeah, I can comment from a practical perspective. Robert, would you? Yeah, so just a quick one. A lot of the ideas that have just been spoken about in terms of, say, liability, a tool like any other, that as practitioners, when we need to take accountability for. From my perspective, as someone who's developed one of these platforms, that's also there's liability there. It's not just thrown out into the world, and I think it's really important to have a dialogue around ways that it can all these applications can better meet the requirements of, say, government, if government were to be using it or relying on the outputs produced by a platform like that. And then that all feeds back into the way that a platform that uses AI is able to deliver its insight. And I was actually at a conference on Saturday just on this topic. It's around how do you clean the inputs that are going into it to make them safe and secure? For example, people put things like personally identifiable data into fields that they shouldn't. Even you can ask them 100 times not to, and they'll still do it. On the output side, how can you vouch for the fact that the outputs being produced are accurate, reliable? Well, there are many different things that you can do, but the number one is, as Biming has mentioned quite a bit, is having a human in the loop. And that's done not just at the time of output, but in all of the sort of error checking and validations that have been before that as well. And to that, there's quite a lot. And there's many different edge cases. You never know how someone's going to use a platform. And every time you pick up on one, you iterate and you build that in to improve. So anyway, these are many different layers that go into baking a cake of an application that can actually be trusted in a sense.
I feel like there's so many angles we go from here, but we're getting ready for questions soon. I might just ask each of the panelists just to thinking about future directions and practicalities. What would a realistic 5-year vision look like for AI in CBA for Australia? And what one step would you recommend today to set us on the right path?
Manipulating large databases of information is not where we have our challenges in CBA. Where we have our challenges in CBA, in my experience at least, is terrible problem definitions and bad option selection. And deciding what matters enough to be worth our effort to make it better. Is this problem affecting people whose needs are the responsibility of their neighbours and taxpayers? Have we really done our homework and our research to understand that the intervention we plan to make is likely to work, that it can be delivered with the resources and skills that we have, that it doesn't have perverse outcomes and unintended consequences? The deep thinking, this is what drives us crazy, right? I love the bus example, right? I love buses. I'm ex-transport myself. But a bus CBA is easy. Buses are great. More of them is generally great. But when you're looking at programs to keep kids out of prison, it's just really complicated. And I've lived through the big data revolution and various other, eras of great technological ambition and possibility, and they never had anything to say about keeping kids out of prison. We live in a community that has managed to invent weight loss drugs, but AIDS is still a problem. Our priorities are what matters, our deep thinking, our ethical choice making. As economists, I would love us to get back to that. And I think in 5 years, we'll be still having that same challenge.
Yeah, look, I'm probably interested in what all the other panelists have to say here. But look, from my perspective, I think if we've got the right trade-off balance in terms of we've actually dealt with the drudgery, I don't have to worry about that. That seems to be something that Aaron and others are working on, which is fantastic. We can get that all done. And that allows us the space to be able to think through the more complex problems. And I think if we're at that spot, it's great. But I also hope that in 5 years, we've also got the right balance in terms of what this means for skills and training. That's actually the one that's bothering me absolutely the most. So I'm open to a discussion about that at some point, but I think that's a really big issue.
Yeah, there's clearly an opening to develop maybe a CBA application for deep diving into relevant problems. I wouldn't say that what I've developed is designed necessarily to do that, but what it does facilitate well. And again, I can only speak from my head has been in developing one application for the last year. I can only speak from that perspective, really. What it does do well is allow people to get on the same page very quickly and to explore options and to test what-if type scenarios. So you can say, okay, say, for example, in the prisons case, what if the values that we accepted were X, Y, or Z amount? What outcome does that lead to? And having that early exploration of those values enables you to then later down the path potentially avoid having gone down rabbit holes, essentially. You've identified risks early, you've identified opportunities early. I think it gives more observability to the problem. It doesn't necessarily do the thinking of the theoretical foundational rationale for it, but it certainly gives you a tool to better observe the outcomes, and I would say that's a good thing.
Yeah, so I'm not a CBA practitioner, so I can't comment on the CBA itself. But I think the important thing maybe you should consider investing today is your evaluation infrastructure. Evaluate whether AI is good or not. People say, oh, AI is a rapidly developing technology. Tomorrow there will be another technology coming through. What can I do? It's so fast. But I would say your evaluation infrastructure would be the same. Tomorrow is another model. Tomorrow is the human, this AI is so good at certain drudgery tasks that you don't need oversight anymore. But for certain other things, you still need oversight. How do we design that oversight to compensate for the limitation of AI? And AI keeps improving, or maybe you never let AI do certain things. So that evaluation infrastructure, once you are in there, and through that learning and assurance, you will be much more confident to evaluate your AI deployment. One thing you may run into is the baseline comparison. Everybody talks about baseline, counterfactuals. You are indeed comparing with human, and human do not want to be compared and do not want to be measured. And you may run into a little bit of sensitivity in there, but I think, by identifying the interesting job for human to do, as everybody says here, you don't like drudgery, that interesting job might need to be invented rather than limiting your thoughts into the current interesting job. And then forgo this, I have to compete with AI. I have to find some flaws in AI to justify my existence. I think in the extreme case, you can learn from AI. In other cases, you are going to be very important for the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point to move to questions from the audience. And I think we might need to give up one of these mics.
Thanks again, and also to the organisers. I think we've all agreed it's a great day. I want to just explore a little bit this human in the loop. I think that's a cop-out, because obviously we want humans in the loop. We want to be looking at it and whatever. But first of all, it was already raised as to how do these humans have these capabilities to be able to do this? How are they just indeed the sinkhole of responsibility and liability, which they're not going to enjoy? But there's also the standard heuristic that we know of just machine bias. It's just a lot easier to accept what a machine suggests. Imagine you're a judge and you're sitting there in the US with that recidivism AI they had, and there it is saying, don't let this guy out because for reasons I cannot justify because I cannot know, the machine has said he's a risk to the community. What judge is ever going to override that decision on any basis at all and take the personal responsibility to let the criminal out and then take the risk of whatever happens there? None. So this idea of human in the loop, I think, is really poorly formulated as to exactly what we really mean by taking projections or recommendations in a common language of machines and empowering humans to overturn those. And I wonder if the panel really, if you get beyond just the sort of the high level optics that we could all agree on, almost the motherhood statements, and actually think, can we really do this?
I'm happy to
quickly. I think just agree, because if your evaluation is good enough for certain tasks, humans should not be in the loop at all. Actually, a lot of studies, not only automation bias, there's also automation aversion. So there are cases where empirical study shows you have a human in the loop. The human keeps overriding the correct recommendations of AI because they are sort of thinking they are the experts, and seems it's not intuitive to them. And AI alone outperforms AI human teaming or augmentation. Again, based on evaluation evidence. In other places, the AI will make mistakes. You design a very meaningful oversight in the loop to correct that mistake. I think when that works wonder, that can definitely solve the problem. So it's a spectrum. Certain things will no longer have human in the loop, which many things we do. You have a calculator. You don't ask a calculator to have a human in the loop to recalculate. So that's probably going to be a spectrum that you work on.
Yeah, look, and my response to that was perhaps a little bit similar to that, in that I think it depends on the decision, doesn't it? Like and the materiality of that decision and the consequences of that decision. So in your case, a judge making a decision as to whether someone is a risk to society, well, that's obviously quite a important decision. It's going to have serious consequences on this particular individual. I would suggest that would be a circumstance that a human should be involved in that. But other, perhaps less material or less impactful, I know we all know that there are shades of grey here. There might be circumstances where we think it's okay for a machine and an AI tool to make a decision. So I think what you're starting to raise, I think, is a wonderful question, but one that we need to turn our minds to in terms of in what circumstances are we happy and what circumstances are we not, and we'll all disagree on what they might be, but perhaps that's the right sort of question to work through. And I guess as I was listening to you there, David, I was mindful of the idea that there's not one person in the world anywhere that can build an aeroplane, right? Like it's full of lots and lots of different componentry and lots of elements of that. But I presume that someone at the end of the day certifies that it's safe. Now that person can't possibly check every element of that, but they're relying on all the other bits. Because they have a system and process whereby they can rely on those things. Now, at the moment, my guess is that part of that is human and part of that is probably machine, even now. So I think it's just a natural extension of those sorts of ideas and the circumstances where we think it's okay to let a machine make that decision because we have confidence over time that systematically those decisions are more likely to be right and the benefits of accepting that decision is okay. Or acceptable, but there might be some decisions where that's not the case. I think there's a paper in that, David.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh no, Cassandra.
So, look, I think my point of view, which I was pretty clear about, is, I mean, like, what do you hate? Hey, just keeping you in the loop. Get an email, just keeping you in the loop. Do you feel empowered? Do you feel in control when people go, I'm just keeping you in the loop? No, I think we should keep our foot on its neck. Absolutely. Certainly until it stops being so racist. I mean, like, until it learns how to behave. But what I would say, just as a final thought, the best part of economics is not the maths. Behavioral economics is a tautology, right? We all know economics is really about incentives. It's about human behavior. It's about psychology. So be really thoughtful about the kinds of decision-making you choose to give away. Because every time you give away responsibility and give away accountability, then you're changing the way we do everything. And at the moment, the incentives that matter is that the commercial interests of producers and suppliers of this technology are aggressively being pursued. The interests of citizens are being government is trying to respond quickly, has been caught off guard, is trying to protect people's privacy, trying to protect people's intellectual property rights, trying to respond in a way that's accountable and responsible to something that is being pushed on us at speed. So think as economists about the incentives at work here in the economy, and think also about the cost-benefit analysis on things like the amount of energy that we're consuming to do a lot of things that don't seem very productive. There's a bigger economic conversation to have here, and maybe when we're freed up from the drudgery, we could have more of those.
Do we have time for one last question, Robert? One last question. Well, Robert's not looking. Is it?
Last question. Quick question, quick answer. Come on.
Maybe we are.
Okay. Sorry to do that. I do apologize. It is a fabulous topic. It's a fabulous panel. We could all go on. If I can just, on behalf of the Economic Society, thank you very much.